Hey guys, welcome back. Have you ever come home excited from a shoot, pumped to get your photo into Lightroom and make it pop, only to end up with an image that feels a little bit fake or off? You're not alone. It's always tempting to jump right in and crank up the sliders, saturation, contrast, clarity, pushing your image all around just to get that look of that last inspirational photo you've seen on Instagram or work from your favourite artist. The fact is, raw files can look dull, especially if you've followed my tip from this video and are shooting in a flat profile. But pushing those controls too far leads to crazy skies and crunchy details that can feel completely artificial. Some of my most cherished prints here in the gallery looked a little bit flat at first glance. Today, we're going to explore why the restraint of a subdued edit often wins out over the allure of instant pop, and how Lightroom fits into the broader process of intentional editing. When people think of Lightroom tutorials, they often expect a rundown of sliders. This slider does this, that slider does that. I'm not doing that today. Today, we're talking about why you move a slider, and more importantly, when you shouldn't. I want to show you how to use Lightroom as a part of a larger process rather than a magic fix for every photo. If you stick around and watch this video, you'll have a framework for editing with intention. You'll stop dragging sliders around hoping for a miracle and start making deliberate choices that support you to make images that you're proud of. First, we need to name the mistake. It's easy to blame oversaturation or heavy texture, but those are symptoms. The real mistake is editing without intention. It's easy to load a raw file, crank the saturation, slam the highlights and shadows, and add a heap of clarity. Copy someone else's preset and then wonder why it feels a bit wrong. Many of us make those adjustments before we've even balanced our exposure. We're trying to fix a weak image with aggressive editing. I've done it too. I remember pushing the vibrant slider until the sky looked electric because I thought that was what made a good photo. But one day there was this point where I just realised it never quite felt right. When we edit this way, we're also treating Lightroom as if it can rescue anything, and it can't. If the light was poor or the exposure was wrong in the first place, no amount of slider pushing will create magic. Over-editing strips away the authenticity of the scene and often leaves an overly simple, artificial look. We see this especially in skies that are oversaturated and shadows that are lifted too much. You might get a bit of attention on social media, but it's unlikely you'll produce an image that you'd be proud to hang on your wall. If you haven't watched my last two videos, now's a good time to head back and watch them, because the concepts that I stepped out in both of those videos are the building blocks for today's topic. So how do we avoid the trap? Editing starts long before Lightroom opens. It starts in the field when we press the shutter. Being present really matters. Paying attention to the subject and the light, how the scene makes you feel and what moves you, because you'll need these observations when it comes to your decisions during the edit. Also, use your histogram to see how the tones are distributed and avoid clipping highlights or shadows. Resist the urge to overexpose just because it looks better on the back of the camera. Protect the information in the file, you'll need it. And it's always important to shoot raw files to retain all the data. JPEG files compress and discard detail, while a raw file holds more colour, more tone, gives you more information to work with later. And then finally, set a neutral or flat picture profile so the histogram reflects the actual capture. It may look a bit boring, and that's okay, but those flat tones preserve the highlights and shadows that you're going to need later. Think back to my cup analogy from this video. Your goal is to fill the cup with as much information as possible, not to make the preview look perfect. Now let's walk through my editing workflow. I want you to think of this as a flexible process that you can adapt, but it's not a recipe that you should copy line by line. I made my approach into broad steps that build from a neutral starting point towards a finished image. Everything begins with balancing exposure. I always start with the exposure slider because it moves the entire tonal range together, lifting or lowering midtones, highlights, and shadows in unison. Moving all the tones together keeps their relationships intact and gives the image a more natural flow before you fine-tune other controls later. This prevents you from chasing highlights and shadows before you even have an overall balance. Watching the histogram in this step can be incredibly important. If you've shot an exposure to protect the highlights in a really high contrast scene, the first step will feel like you're going a bit backwards. But trust me, it's the one step that I've adopted in my process that I will never change. Once the exposure is balanced, I make gentle global adjustments. I set the white and black points to define the brightest and darkest values, and then I nudge highlights and shadows to recover detail without flattening the contrast. I level the horizon, check the crop, and remove any obvious distractions. This isn't the time for huge swings. Resist the urge to crank saturation or clarity. Those controls will come later. Adjustments here should be small and supportive. Think of this stage as creating a blank canvas, a balanced file that is neutral and information rich. After setting the overall exposure, I take time to balance the colour using the temperature and tint sliders. This step pulls the whole image together by neutralising any unwanted colour casts or warming or cooling the scene to match the light that I experienced. Depending on your camera's white balance setting, the raw file may lean warm or cool. Adjusting these sliders at this stage helps you match the mood, and it ensures that subsequent adjustments build on a cohesive base. Colour balance is not about making everything perfectly neutral. It's about evoking the feeling that you had in the field. I've got a hot tip for this one. If you're struggling with your colour balance because you can't see or feel the balance, adjust your saturation to 100%, just for the period of time where we're doing this colour adjustment. It's like turning up the volume and all the colours, and it allows you to have a really clear picture of what colours are actually in your image. Just don't forget to reset the saturation once you're done. Now we have our tone and our colour balanced across the whole image. I like to call this stage my blank canvas. It's a point where, for the most, all of the global adjustments have been made, and we're at a point where we will now fill the gaps with local adjustments through masking. And this is where you can start to get a little creative. I decide where I want the viewer's eye to go, and I use local adjustments to guide them. If the sky's too bright, a linear gradient can subtly darken it. If the foreground needs light, a radial mask can lift it. A splash of light here or a darkened foreground there helps liberate your vision from the constraints of the sensor. Each image is different, so there's no one-size-fits-all brush. The point is to use masks to enhance what you felt in the field rather than to fix everything. After this step, I pause and evaluate. Ask myself, is there anything else that annoys me? I toggle the before and after view on and step away from the screen. If the edit shocks me when I return, it's probably a bit much. I repeat this process until nothing else stands out. This iterative review is crucial because our perception drifts when we stare at screens for a long time. Less is often more. The last step is all about the final polish and the intended output. If the image is destined for print, I remember that prints are darker and less vibrant than screens, so I might lift the shadows slightly. I check my monitor calibration and I make test prints to ensure that the tones translate. This is where I refine colour using white balance, vibrance, and the HSL panel. I make tone tweaks and apply sharpening and noise reduction carefully, masking out smooth areas like skies. If you plan to publish on social media, you might even need a different crop or different level of contrast. Either way, ask yourself if the photograph honours the moment you've captured. That question has become a huge part of my personal practice. I don't want my photographs to only look good for a few seconds on the screen. I want them to hold up when they become something physical, something you can hold in your hands, frame, hang on a wall, and live with over time. Printing has changed the way I edit. It slows me down. It makes me more honest. It forces me to look past the quick hit of contrast and colour and ask whether the image actually has depth, mood, and subtlety. When a photograph becomes a print, there's nowhere to hide. If the sky's too crunchy, if the colours are pushed too far, if the shadows have been lifted until everything feels flat, it becomes obvious very quickly. I'll talk a bit more about printing in the future. I've got videos planned because I genuinely believe it's one of the best ways to become a better photographer. But for now, even if you are only sharing your work online, try using print as the standard. Ask yourself whether the edit would still feel strong if it was hanging on a wall, not just flashing past in a feed. All right, let's bring it home. The biggest Lightroom mistake is not pushing the wrong slider. It's editing without intention. When we move sliders blindly, we end up with oversaturated, crunchy images that feel artificial. The cure is to approach editing as a process of subtraction. Remove distractions, support your subject, keep colours believable, embrace restraint. Less is often more. The goal is not to show off your editing skills, but to honour the moment you captured. If you remember one thing from this video, let it be this. Editing is about intention. Use Lightroom as a tool to shape the story you already witnessed, not a fix for your mistakes. When you start with a well-exposed raw file and a clear vision, the sliders become your friends. When you forget why you were moving them, they become your enemies. Next time you open Lightroom, don't ask which slider you should move and start asking what you want to say with the image. Take your time, trust subtlety, and if you're stuck, print your work and look at it on paper. There's nothing like holding your photograph in your hands to see what it needs. I'd love to hear about your own editing struggles and victories. Drop a comment below. I'm always in the comments answering all of your questions. Until next time, stay safe and keep shooting.